Hey everybody, Bob Chick back with another edition of the Voice of Bodybuilding, powered by Panana, brought to you by Celsius, and of course our good friends at Mutant. And speaking of mutants, one of the best of all time with us, Mr. Mutant. Oh, look at that. The guns are out. Sun's out, guns out. Sugar Shawn Ray in the house. What's up, buddy?
I'm good. These guns are retired a long time ago. I'm the cardio king.
Yeah, you didn't have to really say that. We can see it, so but that's okay. It's still there, bro. Listen, cardio is king at our age, and that's okay. But, Shawn, good to have you back on. And we are starting a new series, a countdown series, as we are at the 6-month mark to the 60th Olympia coming up.
Yeah, that's coming pretty quick, man. It's hard to believe that in 1965, shortly before the Olympia in September, 1 month prior, I arrived on the scene. And a couple of months later, you came to join the fray back in December of 65. And you're in the middle of the Vietnam War and the Malcolm X shooting and coming off the heels of JFK getting shot and civil rights movement. There was all kind of crap going on. But yet Larry Scott found his way to the podium and received the crown, the royal crown.
Well, we're going to get into all that. We're going to break this up because, like I say, we're at the 6-month mark. So what we're going to do is we're going to take it by decades, and we're going to cover at least a decade every time that we get on camera. So it should be a 6-part series. I think it'll be pretty cool and informative to all the bodybuilding historians out there. And we got a lot of behind the scenes stuff, as we've talked to many historians throughout the years. Peter McGuff, who's no longer with us, unfortunately, and Shawn, and those who we've lost along the way, but we've learned a whole lot of history from those guys. So hang tight on that, guys. We've got some business to take care of first. And Shawn, I understand you got a little gift box today.
I did. I got this in the mail. Compliments of our boys over at Mutant. I got the Mind package. That's FK for abbreviation.
Gotcha.
Comes with a nice hat, a Mutant hat, right?
Oh, wow. Look at that.
You can't do anything without the shaker cup.
Got the shaker cups, got the hat. That's a nice.
And the newest pre-workout right there. The new and improved from the All In series pre-workout. This is the kind of stuff you need to revitalize, re-energize, and stimulate your workouts.
I actually have your pre-workout here. I can't grab it. It's out of my touch right here.
Yeah, the All In. This is new and improved on All In. The Mind.
Oh, wait a minute. There it is. Look at that. A little help from the. Oh, look at that, Shawn.
Oh, there you go. That's some good stuff.
Where's the one with your face on there? I got one that's got your head.
Look at this. I got my little my backpack, right?
What is that? Cinch sack backpack? Some kind of
big enough to carry the new Mind products.
They give us a product we can actually say. I mean,
I can't say it, man. My mom would be like, "What did you say?" Bam! I'm used to picking my teeth up off the ground.
Well, listen, we appreciate that. What a great looking gift box. Thank you to all the boys over at Mutant, especially the king of all mutants, of course, Jim Manion. So
yeah, it's available at IamMutant.com.
Absolutely. So, bro, we got lots to cover before we get into the Olympia series. This week, Pittsburgh is coming up. Now, anybody in the bodybuilding industry knows that Pittsburgh is really the kind of the kickoff when it comes to Olympia talk. Who's in, who's out, who's looking good, if you remember, and I know you do. It was right there in Pittsburgh that Derek Lunsford made his mark and put his name on the map of legitimate contenders to the Olympia, and I think he made out pretty good with that one.
Yeah, and we were just there to observe, right? That was the one that Big Ramy missed. He didn't show up for. But of the guest posers, we saw that far away from the Olympia coming off a 212 victory that this guy's in the wrong division. He's much bigger than a 212. He could carry the weight. He could carry the muscle. And there was no reason to go back and do what you've always done. Got second place to Shawn Clarida. Then he ultimately beat Shawn Clarida. The natural next feather in the cap would be see how he fares in the open category. And that's on the heels of watching Shawn Clarida win at the Reno Pro earlier in the year, coming off of 5th place at the Arnold Classic. So I sat down at the dinner table. You weren't too far away with Henry Rombot. I said, dude, you got to go open. Steve Weinberger said, you got to go open. I think everybody at the right time, based on a guest appearance, mind you, said, listen, there's nothing left in the 212. You got to go open. And, the kid goes in the open, gets a second place, then turns around a year later and he walks off with the Sandow. I believe he's the 20th winner. Is he the 20th champion?
Geez, you're asking me.
There's some trivia. I think, I don't know why, but I see Brandon Curry is like 8.
Curry was 15.
He was 15. Okay, then we had Big Ramy.
16.
Then we had Hadi Chupan.
17.
Then we had Derek.
18.
All right, so he's
we're not even
number
at
18.
20, which tells you how prestigious this is. That in 60 years, less than 20 people have actually held this title. But interestingly, just on a side note, what helped one guy hurt another, where Derek needed to go up in weight, and it certainly helped fill out his physique. It was our own Shawn that put on a few pounds, kind of went the other way, but it actually hurt him and cost him the title.
Well, because I didn't think he might have saw Keon Pearson coming. I mean, Keon was kind of a promise that wasn't really kept. He always had the potential that he could win these other shows, but at the Olympia, it was just about timing. And on that day, Keon showed up and he filled out his frame. And this was at a time where Shawn was trying to add something to where I didn't think he needed to add. I thought if he just did what he was doing, it would have been enough for victory. That was a close loss for Shawn.
Yep.
It's retainable. It's definitely retainable. And in October, I think if Shawn continues to be hungry, because sometimes losing is the best medicine.
I don't think he's going to make the same mistake twice. He very early on recognized, he said to me personally, I know I came in a couple of pounds heavier. It hurt me. I won't make that mistake again. So I'm suspecting he's going to go back down. We're only talking a few pounds, but that's all it takes at this level. And Keon is exceptional. Keon, for those historians out there, is Edgar Fletcher. Okay, this guy is tremendous. What beautiful shape and proportions and symmetry, all those ideals we talk about, Shawn, and he's got them all. The question is, if Shawn Clarida goes back to what got Shawn Clarida in that winner's circle, what kind of a race do we have now?
That's the thing. I mean, Shawn's now a new father. He's got his gym up and running. He's got his shoe business kicking off. And it seems like he's in a better space because, again, sometimes losing is the best medicine. He realized what he had and what he actually lost. And Keon's in unfamiliar territory defending that title, right? So if Keon took his foot off the brake and relaxed to enjoy the fruits of his labor on any level, he can lose the title, much like Hadi Chupan did to Derek. So this category is definitely going to be one to watch come Olympia time.
Well, Pittsburgh, like I say, is 1 week away. Everybody knows Jim Manion show. This is the only spot that you can actually see all these Olympians in one place at one time, other than the Olympia. So it's very prestigious when it comes to a preview for us fans out there. But listen to this for a who's of names. Nick Walker's going to be there. Now, that's 1 week before he's going on stage in New York. So he's going to obliterate everybody on the guest posing stage in terms of conditioning, and he should, right? But great to see him back out. Derek's going to be back out there. So that's going to be exciting to see how much different or how much more filled out he is this time than last year. And we saw what happened last year. But the biggest name on, let me just shoot a few out. Chris Bumstead's going to be there. I don't know whether he's going to throw his hat out there, Shawn, and we can coerce him into coming up at the same time. Mo Shaban, Hunter, Sampson will be there. Andrew Jack, So we got a couple of classic guys going in there. Martin Fitzwater also going in New York. But the biggest name out of all of them that everybody's waiting to see is Big Ramy is actually going to be there. And now we're going to see, did taking the time off help him, hurt him, or unchanged?
Well, I can tell you a lot of guys, when they take the time off, they don't come back looking better. And I don't know what that is, but it's a historical fact that you can actually chart. Guys that take a year off, they kind of lose some traction, lose a bit of hardness. And Ramy's not young like he used to be. I
think he's 40 this year, correct?
Yeah, he used to say that's how old he wanted to be when he retired and got out of the sport. So he's right there with Father Time, and he's going up against some young guys that are coming into their prime. Be interesting to see what he looks like. They got plenty of time to go before October, so whatever mistakes. Look, it's really not a fair comparison. Nick's competing a week from now.
We're gonna take Nick and honestly Martin out because they're on the verge. They're 7 days away from competing, so they're going to be in the best shape. Arguably, we all get that, but I think this is kind of a make it or break it for Ramy. I think you're going to see the fruits of his labor in this past year or so. Whether I know he was getting some stem cell, he was getting some other things, some remedies to hopefully fix whatever was wrong. But honestly, Shawn, to me, this is a make it or break it for Ramy. I say you either see a guy that walks out and you go, oh my God, look at this. He's back. All those things are fixed, right? Or is it his early demise? Could this backfire and people just wipe him out after this?
Well, May, June, July, August, September, October. It's a half a year away from us seeing the best of what he has to offer. I used to see Dorian Yates guest pose in March and thought there's no way he's going to win the Olympia. I used to see Lee Priest in May and think there's no way he's going to do anything at the Olympia.
Bro, you used to see Kevin Levrone at any
Kevin
time.
Levrone.
You didn't think Levrone even walked into the gym.
Yeah, so we're not really going to see a true representation of what's possible because he literally has another half a year to hit his stride. We're going to see a big Ramy. I don't think it'd be a fair comparison to have him stand next to Nick. I think Nick and Fitzwater should probably open the show and have all the other guys towards the end. Putting him in there with these guys, it's not going to be really good. It'll be something for people to talk about on Instagram, but it won't be a fair comparison. However, Lunsford did show us what was possible in the month of May.
Just going there.
Yeah, and what he should do. I think he heard enough from the right people. He made the right conscious decision. We're going to find out if Big Ramy is serious about it. I mean, I think it's hard sometimes the older you get to get a second win. But we do know that Ronnie Coleman in the second half of his career was better than the first half.
Well, let me ask you this, because there was noticeable problems with Ramy's physique when he decided to take some time. The triceps seemed to be disappearing. The back, most notably, seemed to be some problems with that. Whether it was muscle was wasting away, nerve damage, again, we don't really know. But will we see whether it's A, fixed, or B, not fixed, because he's in off-season mode? Because a lot of these things you don't really see until you start dieting down, and then you see what you really got. So do you think, in your opinion, of what you've seen over the years, when he walks out on that stage, is it going to be a thumbs up or a thumbs down?
Yeah, he's going to come out traditionally Big Ramy. Look, he's going to, if he looks anything like he normally does, we're going to have that wow factor. It's when he stands next to the guys that have been doing the business of bodybuilding that we're going to find out whether or not he's made progress in the right direction. By himself, I don't think he'll look that much unfamiliar. It's very hard to fall all the way off, especially when you're in the process of rebuilding. We're catching him in the building phase, not the dietary phase. So he could be as big as a house with zero detail and that big round ball of clay. He's got 6 months to chisel it up, and we know what lies underneath all that body fat. But I don't think we're going to see everything we're supposed to in May that we will in October. But he knows what his weaknesses are. I don't think he's going out there to embarrass himself. He's been here before. I just know that when you take time away from that fight, from that hunger, from that grind, and you're making that kind of money and you're kind of relaxed and you're not doing the business, it's hard to make that muscle snap back and turn it back into what it once was. So out of all the guys that are in that lineup, he's got the biggest hill to climb.
Well, Shawn, you mentioned the giant killer Shawn 30, a new father. Congratulations to him and his wife. So he's in uncharted territories with the Enfamil and the diapers. You remember those good old days. That said, Chris Bumstead also, him and his wife, congrats go out to. He just had their first child, a son, I believe. So congratulations to Chris. But if there's a second story that's at here, everybody knows Derek's going to look crazy with that big back and everything. We saw the video recently. It's comparison of Chris to the Open, guys. I mean, a lot of speculation. You speculated yourself. If Chris Bumstead threw his hat in the open ring, you might be looking at your next Mr. Olympia. You actually believe he could win the title.
I do, but I think that ship sailed. I think he's comfortable. I think he doesn't want to rock the boat. I think he believes that he's right where he wants to be, and he's happy with the way things are going. I personally don't like that attitude. If I was him, it definitely wouldn't be enough. Forget the prize money, but you know what? At the end of the day, it's still a business, and there's a huge difference between winning 50,000 and 400,000, especially when you could be a potential favorite, especially when you can make history. When Chris wins his number 6, if let's just say that he does, is it any more of an achievement than winning number 5 when you beat the same guys? I'm not 100% sure, but if he wins 1 Olympia, it's over. He's in the record books. Doesn't have anything else to prove. He's a 2-time title holder like Derek Lunsford. He doesn't have to come back to defend the title. He's just made what is that, 6 times the money or 7 times the money that he would have made. And he's got his new kid. I mean, he can sail off into the sunset competition wise, but he did tell me way early in his career he wanted to win 7 classic physique titles. And just to put it out of reach like that, because it'll be very hard for someone to come win 7 of those. But 1 Olympia win, I think, would be more important than 7 of those titles.
Well,
That's my opinion.
we're going to see how he matches up. Now, I don't know if he's in any shape. He might be in pure off season. He never really seems to stray too far. I've never seen Chris, what we would consider fat or off season that bad. But that'll still be a fun comparison. But all that taking place in Pittsburgh this weekend coming up, you want to see the best in the world. It's the only other stage you're going to see it other than Vegas coming up this year. Everybody knows that's back in Vegas again, the Olympia for the 60th this year at the Resorts World. So that'll be very exciting as we go down the road of the Olympia history. And the New York Pro coming up the week after Pittsburgh. So Big Steve Weinberger putting that one on. $120,000 in prize money, Shawn. So they have bumped this up significantly. I think that's very important for the sport overall. We're going to get into that in just a little bit. But a few names. We've already talked about Nick Walker, clearly the odds-on favorite going in. Tonio Burton, I believe, is also going to be going in. Martin Fitzwater, I think it's a great move. Again, fresh off a victory. He's in shape. He might as well go in and listen, maybe he can steal one, right? Beef Stu Sutherland, he's back in there. I don't know whether he's still got the hair work in there or not, Shawn, but we're going to see Tim Budesheim, Ron Gordon, and a host of others. But the big name to materialize this week is a guy who goes by Quint Beastwood, which I always thought was kind of a funny. It's Quinton area. Bro, this guy is not only big, but he's very put together. He reminds me of a early Paul Dillette.
Yeah.
With his genetics. And I think he's made enough strides where he has a legitimate shot to take out Nick Walker. What do you think?
Well, there's always one, right? Every once in a while, somebody gets thrown into the mix and you're like, holy crap. Like, where did Dorian come from back in 1990, right? Or I should say 91 when he arrived at the Olympia. Every once in a while, some stray cat throws a monkey wrench in there. Nick's not taking his foot off the gas. Listen, he heard all the criticism. He saw how fragile being on top is when he got injured, had to sit there in a wheelchair, watch the Olympia, go to the Arnold Classic, a show that he's won before, and watch that go down. And you miss what you once did on a regular basis. He's still probably training with very good caution for very good reason. You don't want to re-injure that leg. But if he took his foot off the gas and put that thing on cruise control, somebody like Quinton can come in and it'll be an eye-opener, be a slap in the face, because you can't cruise into these shows because you have to train for the unknown. And this guy is the X factor. If he comes in shape, he's in condition. Forget about shape. He has the shape.
Yeah.
He actually has better shape.
Yeah.
If he comes in condition, it's going to spell trouble for Nick, regardless of what he's done in the past, because we can't talk about what Nick did a year and a half or 2 years ago. Healthy Nick. Now we're dealing with an injured Nick who's going to have to try to mask, work around, deal with an injury so severe that it cost him a run at the Olympia 1 year. So is Nick training harder than he was before the injury? Time will tell. His legs were not his weak point. But this kid knows that he can really be topic of conversation if he can take this guy out on a show that's this important as they increase the prize money. The New York Pro has always been a very important show heading into the Olympia.
Well, we saw him last year. I believe, I could be wrong on this, I think it was the Texas or one of those shows that he was in. And I think he finished behind Martin. Again, I'm just purely going off of memory. But so we have seen him, but he has made notable progress. Now, he's a tall dude. He's probably close to 6'2", if I'm guessing. He looked to be about the same size as Andrew Jack. But you got some monsters coming out of the woodwork, which could spell trouble, like you said. But it looks like he filled out a little bit more. Again, hard to do on that frame, but once you do, it's notable. But I just sent you a picture myself that I stumbled across for you to take a look at. And if you put them next to each other, this could be a real good competition for both of these guys. But I'm with you. Again, he reminds me of Dillette with a better back. And if Dillette ever had a back, he might have won. He might have damn well won the Olympia.
I think
he
all of us agree.
Pull it.
Yeah, we all agree on that. And Quinton has a very good opportunity to have his name kicked around in the mix, even if he challenges Nick. Because really, this is Nick's show to lose. Everyone else is showing up for window dressing. If Nick slips up on any level, and it can happen. We saw it happen going into the Olympia. I don't wish you bad luck on anybody. But again, Nick's probably training cautiously, smart, train smarter, not harder. And if Quinton brings in the condition, he doesn't have to worry about the size. The guy's plenty big enough. he's put together better than Nick. And that's where the problem is going to lie for Nick if Nick is not 100%. He has to be 100% because we can't say, oh, you're 6 months away from the Olympia and you're going to be better. They will judge this show on the day, not based on potential.
Well, good luck to all these competitors. I don't think either one of it. Will you be in New York? I won't be there.
I won't be there either now.
But we will have our heads glued
Pittsburgh
to the internet to see the updates and how the call and comparisons are going. So best of luck to Steve Weinberg and his crew. Always put on a great show, and congratulations. The prize money getting bumped up is significant, Shawn, and I want to get into why. It's going to segue into the next chapter, which I want to touch on. The IFBB has taken a proactive approach to getting the prize money up by way of sponsor money and equaling prize money that's already been given out. I think this is huge, much bigger than people even know, because I was doing a little research this week for this podcast, and some of the numbers are frightening. And when I say frightening, I'm going down the list. Now, I only looked at the USA and the Nationals, okay? But we keep asking, where are all the names? Where are all the new guys? Okay, where are the guys that are turning pro? And we wait and we wait and we wait, and we don't see anybody. So I says, you know what? Let me just take a look at that, because some of that, that can get stretched a little bit over time. It's like, oh, this guy competed here, this guy competed there. But here's what I came up with. I looked at the USA and the Nationals, just those two. No North Americans, no second place finishes, and no other divisions. Just open men, guys that turned pro, 2019 to 2022. All right, just stopping short of last year because those are really new people. Okay. Here's what I came up with. There's about 30 names here that have won pro cards, have won the USA, won the Nationals, that we haven't seen. And when I say we haven't seen, they haven't competed. 4 out of the 30 we have seen, which is Tonio Burton. I believe Nathan Epler, I do believe, was in one show, if I'm not mistaken. Justin Shire, good young kid. Again, we saw him in a show or two last year. Haven't seen him this year yet. And Stu Sutherland, all right, Beef Stu. Oh, and Carlos, okay. That's it. Now, Carlos we've seen once. A lot of promise. Again, people keep wanting to know and all that kind of stuff. But, Shawn, somebody that's super, Zach Merkel, Chris Robinson, Martin Gomez, Dominic Semenza, Matt Maldonado. Any of these ring a bell yet?
Absolutely not.
Michael Condell, Justin Jacoby, Austin Connolly, Brandon Laird, Hunter Lee, Jonas Giatris, Matt Schmidt, Fernando Bueno, Robert Wickman, Jeff T. Sheriffant. I actually remember from the Nationals in 2020. Jonathan Withers, Mike Lancome, Kevin Ogbabor, Ben Pollock, Jordan Hutchinson, Andre McShaw, Ryan Ibrahim, Cole Eastvold, Walter Debs, Nick Jackson, Jake Toll. These are all guys who won the middleweights through the super heavyweights over the last 3-4 years that have never touched a pro stage. What's going on?
Listen, I think we're at a place in bodybuilding where, look, these guys get their pro card and they get no direction after the fact. It's not like, in college, you get your college degree and then you go out into the universe and you put your application out and you wait and hopefully somebody likes your resume and they hire you to work. These guys get their pro card and they have no direction. They don't know where they want to compete. They don't know when they should compete. They see a name like Nick Walker on the show, like the New York Pro, and they get scared. It's too big, so they wait and they're trying to pick these shows in different countries where maybe no one will show up or maybe no one will know them. And then, it's risk to reward. Sometimes they look at the prize money and they're shying away from the prize money. Look, Detroit had 6 athletes in it. How many guys turned pro last year that could have gone to Detroit this year and chose to sit it out?
Or any of those 30 names I just read out. Any of those 30 names. And Detroit is a great example. Now, Fuad went out of his way, put on a good show from everything I understand and I heard. Prize money was very good, actually. I believe it was $35,000 or somewhere in that range. And he gave away some other thing, best poser, most muscular, whatever, in the names of some of those we've lost over the years, like Cedric McMillan and such, totaling another $10,000 probably. And it only attracted 6 people. And this was a perfect entry-level show. It's an Olympia qualifier. Don't get me wrong, right?
Yeah.
None of these guys were there. Now, again, This isn't even including second place finishers, which you or I are not a big fan of. I do believe you need to win, but there's inherently a bigger problem here. Now, I do believe that increasing the prize money is a good way to go, but is it a matter of too little and too late, Shawn? You and I were complaining about $10,000 purses 20 years ago.
Yeah,
they just bumped it up now.
Yeah, well, we can go back 30 years. I won 10,000 in 1990 at the Pro
Right.
Ironman. So to hear 10,000 in the year 2024 is not very stimulating, all things considered. These guys, when they get their pro card, have no direction. They have no incentive. We have so many choices now with the divisions that, without a follow-up, here's your pro card. Here's the calendar of the pro shows. Let us know in the next 2 weeks, maybe, what show you might be interested in. I mean, there should be a follow-up process when you win your pro card of what's coming up on the calendar and get them signed up and registered early so the promoters have an opportunity to promote those names, to promote their accomplishments, to include their fan base in their social media. There's a huge disconnect because winning your pro card and paying the whatever fee it is to get your pro card with zero follow-up, it's easy to lose your interest. It's easy to lose your way when you look and you see that the guys being promoted are Hunter Labrada, Nick Walker, Brandon Curry, all the top echelon guys. That prize money that you're talking about, that increase, they need to start putting it down on the lower areas. I'd love to see the guy getting fifth place getting $10,000 and fourth place getting 15, second place getting 20, first place getting 30. If you build from the bottom up, you'll have more inclusion because not all of these guys are A-list guys. And if I'm going in a show that has Nick Walker, I'm praying for some crumbs on the bottom end because there's a few other good guys, like you mentioned Quinton. So what is fifth place playing? If fifth place is paying $1,000, I personally could find a guest posing job for $2,000. And I don't have to get in shape and I don't have to go through the abuse. So I think our federation needs to stop looking at the winner take all prize money and start taking care of the lesser placing guys so that they have an opportunity to survive in this sport of pro bodybuilding.
Well, I think that's a great point, Shawn, that you know, and just to emphasize that, the problem is magnified 10 times over because of the following fact. We're not only not seeing any of these guys competing, but we're also giving away 10 times the amount of pro cards that we used to give away. So it's even bigger when you put it into the grand scheme of things that more people are turning pro. Now, again, we're focusing on the men's open, not the women's divisions, not the other stuff. Okay, just that. Yes, we have had growth in the classic physique division, which is bodybuilding, but it's still not a comparison to the men's open, which is still our pivot foot when it comes to the sport. When you get to the pro level, building up the back end, I think, is huge because, like you said, if you're going to get $1,000 and place third or fourth or fifth, you just lost $14,000 getting ready for the show. Sure. I don't think people are in a position financially to do that. I also think it's a problem because I do believe that we have saturated the amateurs to a degree that I don't think these guys even themselves think that they're ready or willing or able to go against these pros, that they would just get their ass handed to them. So they just says, why bother?
Yeah. So what I witnessed at the Arnold where they made an announcement for 2025, they're going to give another 200,000 to the winner, when I thought mathematically it would have been nice to see Arnold give 100,000 to the winner,
right,
and break that other $100,000 up amongst the 5th through 10th.
Yeah.
Because if you do that, not only do you have these guys walking away with something for their effort, but you have more guys interested in competing because there's some meat on the bone. I mean, if you can give, your 10th place finalist 10,000 and you can kind of incrementally increase it up to the first place, everybody wins. But when you only feed the guys that are making the lion's share, the hungry guys that recognize they can't get fed would rather stay home. And right now, it's noble what Steve's doing, giving more prize money at his show in New York. But I'd like to see more prize money for the top 10 and not top 2 or 3.
Well, while we're speculating, the problems inherently of what may be responsible for the lack of participation from guys who spent the money, put the time in and the effort to get themselves a USA or a Nationals title and an IFBB pro card, but then not taking the next step. And I don't find that to be coincidence. I mean, the numbers don't lie. At the same time, there's no more publications. There was a time where just getting your face on a Flex magazine cover or Muscle and Fitness would have been enough, but those are gone, which subsequently means that publication deals are gone. You don't see those anymore. And it's getting harder and harder to even secure a deal from a supplement company or such because of the advent of social media. over the last, 7, 8 years. So it's piled on even more when you put all those factors together. But I do think that your solution, I do think, is a good one. I would like to see the federation do more of what they are starting to do, which is start to basically deviate some funds into that prize money. Because if not, I see about a 3 or 4 year window where we either have half the amount of shows, which is never a good idea, never good for the community as it would be. Keep in mind, folks, okay, people say, well, maybe there should be less shows. There's too many shows. Everybody makes a living on these shows, okay? The tanning people, the music people, the expediting people, judges, coaches, right? When you start dominoing down, everybody who makes money out of a competition, okay, it's a whole community. But who can't be at the bottom of the list is the athlete. And we're talking about pro stuff, not amateurs, of course. The athlete can't be last on the list, and I think that's where they've ended up, and I think that's why we're in the position that we're in. So I'd like to see this prize money double and even triple over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and listen, the winners aren't complaining about the amount of prize money they're winning. But like you said, not everybody's an A-list bodybuilder. No. And if I'm going to be one of those guys that's a good bodybuilder, but I earned my pro card, why am I going to go to the next level to compete against the best and get nothing? At least when I got my pro card, I feel like I got my diploma. But now I'm going up against the big boys where I'm not going to get anything. So I don't want that expense of getting ready for a show, flying, traveling, sacrifice, time. And I realize, I'm a pro and I'm not going to get anything for it. So I think they should really start trying to double down on the back end and build from the bottom up. You win $400,000 for Mr. Olympia. Is $500,000 going to make that much of a difference for that one individual? You're number one in the world. You probably have a few other contracts. But, if you get 8th in Olympia and you're not getting anything but a pat on the back, do you really want to go back to the Olympia knowing that each year it's getting harder and maybe the same guys are going to be there and maybe you're going to wind up getting 8th place again, maybe even get 10th place. So if 8th, 9th, and 10th has a little bit of value, then I'm going to try to, stay in the game. But if I realize after one shot and I get 5th place in a pro show, why am I going to go do it again?
Yeah, there has to be more incentive. You can't continuously go into shows and lose money. People just aren't in a position to do it, especially these days with the economy, being what it is. Everything's up, prices are up, gas is up, food is up. Competition prep is more expensive than any time that it's ever been. I'll tell you another thing I'd like to see, and this won't be popular amongst a lot of people, but I got to keep things real here. I would put a 2-year moratorium on having a pro card. If we don't see people, 3 years go by and you're not stepping on stage, listen, you go back to being an amateur, kind of like what they do in golf and stuff like that. But if you're not helping the federation, you're not helping yourself, and you're not helping anything that to do with the sport, what good is having a pro card?
I agree.
I say you got 2 years to step on stage as a pro from the time you earn your pro card. I think that's fair, barring injury or anything else that can happen, right? 2 years. If you don't step on stage in that time frame, like out of these 30 people, most of the 25 of them will be gone. Yeah. Go back to the amateurs. If it means anything to you, come on back. But if not, I got to be honest, man, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, I can tell you a lot of them are not competing because they realize how hard it is and how deep the lineups are. So there's really no incentive. Stop giving the winners incentives to compete and don't give the challengers an opportunity. You lose a lot of people. The New York show might even lose a few guys because they realize how big Nick Walker's name is. So what am I going to compete for? I'm trying to qualify for the Olympia. Maybe I'll wait for the Texas Pro. Maybe I'll wait for the Tampa show. We didn't have that back in the day, right? Like in the day, we didn't care who was competing. I went to the Olympia knowing Lee Haney was there. I knew that Flex Wheeler was there. I knew Kevin and Ronnie and Jay and Corin. I didn't give a shit. People care now. These guys are
I went to the night of the champions. There was 48 guys in the show.
Incredible.
It was insane. You know what I mean? But that's just what you did back then. But hopefully some of these things will start to materialize. Again, I do applaud the Pro League because they are starting to be proactive. They have taken some initial steps, and I think that's the right direction to go. And I hope it continues to go that way. But Shawn, we're in our last segment of The Voice of Bodybuilding. And true to word, we're going to talk about the origins of the very first Olympia, 1965 to be specific, Saturday, September 18th. All right. 1965 was your very first Olympia at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. And it was Larry Scott that would come out on top and Harold Poole and a guy named Earl Maynard. You remember Earl Maynard, Shawn, right?
Yeah. I was 9 years old, by the way. I was 9 days old.
9 days old. I was going to say, not even, right? Earl Maynard would actually win the universe earlier that night. So speaking of eye candy, you were able to share with me some stuff, Shawn. But look at this. This is the very first ever program, the 1965 Olympia. Incredible. Look at that. And here's, I got 66 too. Both signed by Larry Scott too. Yeah,
your original Mr. Olympia champion and 2-time champion, repeat champion.
Well, so some interesting notes on the origin. Now, as everybody knows by now, the Olympia was basically organized by Joe Weider. And it was supposed to be a King of Kings show. There was 4 Mr. Universes at the time, AAU, NABA, IFBB, WBBG. There was all these federations. Pretty much anybody who had a publication had a federation. So there was Joe Weider, Dan Lurie, Bob Hoffman, the NABA guy, and so if you had a magazine, it was a good way to get guys on stage and get pictures for your magazine. That's pretty much why they were run back then. Right. So they organized the Olympia, which basically is supposed to be a be-all, end-all to all the universe winners. So it was kind of put out there to everybody that won a universe, come on, why don't you guys all compete? And we'll find out who really is the king. And they came up with the Mr. Olympia title, and history was made. Interestingly, in 1963, 2 years before the Olympia would make its debut, it was Harold Poole who ended up runner-up 3 times at the Olympia. Just some great names, but nonetheless, he actually beat Larry Scott at the universe. So just 2 years before Larry Scott blows up, Harold Poole beats him. Poole was actually the favorite going into the first Olympia, as he had just beaten Larry Scott and a whole host of others. 1964, Poole would go into the Mr. America, the IFBB, which, by the way, is a great trivia question because everybody thinks that Chris Dickerson, rest in peace, was the first black Mr. America, but that was in the AAU. It was actually Harold Poole who was the first black Mr. America in the IFBB, and that was years before Chris Dickerson, which I believe was 1970. So there's some history for you, Shawn.
Yeah, no, good. That's a good footnote. Yeah,
great footnote because nobody knows that one. But so 1965, Larry Scott wins. Wasn't a lot of fanfare. He was great. He looked, tremendous. His arms obviously were crazy. Had those giant cannons for arms. By the way, again, for those wanting to know, the Scott Curl, as it would be called, the preacher, was named after Larry Scott. How about that? So it's 1966 that's interesting because, we got a return. Larry Scott goes back in. He's going to defend the title. Harold Poole goes back in. Harold Poole, and debated to this day, feels he got screwed that show. That he actually should have won the 1966 Olympia.
Well, I think most runner-ups, including Labrada, I talked to extensively about 1990 and 89. Most runner-ups feel we got screwed.
Well, but just to be fair though, in 65, he didn't say he got screwed. He actually thought Larry Scott beat him fair and square and relegated himself to being a second place finisher. And he says, hey, the guy was good. I mean, what are you going to do? They returned the following year, and not so much. He thought it was there was some politics involved. There was some speculation that one of the judges overseas said, "Hey, listen,
I sympathize with the guy until you're in those shoes,
right?
You don't know what it feels like."
Larry Scott booked for a bunch of appearances. It's going to look bad if he loses. There's a lot of speculation back then, and there was a lot of politics back then. Yeah. Let's face it. When it got into the magazine wars and such, Earl Maynard would return. He didn't place in the top 4. Chuck Sipes, who's a perennial back then, he had those giant forearms, if you remember. Yeah. He ended up taking 3rd, and a guy named Sergio Oliva, who actually would win the Mr. World competition, which was held earlier that night, would take 4th place in 1966. So that really set the table. Imagine, if you will, Shawn, looking through these programs, which is, again, just a page of history itself. But the Mr. Universe, the Mr. America, the Mr. Olympia, and the Miss Americana were all on the same night.
Yeah, Lou Ferrigno told me he went there to check that out and witnessed it, and that was really what was the impetus of his pursuit in bodybuilding. Of course, 10 years later, we'd see him in the notorious pumping iron.
Oh yeah, well, listen, if Big Louie was right there in New York, so he could walk down the street to the Brooklyn Academy of Music.
Yeah.
It's interesting because when you look through the program, I mean, they had a band that played. It says
Yeah.
it actually says it says in there like they'd have a show and then it says rock and roll in between. Like,
Well, you got to remember, Bob, when we were at the Mandalay Bay, I think it was 2000, Halloween, we had the Village People.
No, who can forget
Village
that?
People, courtesy of Wayne DeMillia's bright idea.
The greatest promoter that ever lived.
Not only did he bring out the Village People, but most people thought it was a gag. They didn't believe it was the Village People because they were dressed up on Halloween as the Village
People.
People.
Weren't around because me and Shawn were. This was not looked at as a positive, okay? They actually got booed off the stage to the point that they were going to start throwing stuff. they cut the whole set short and had them go out the back. This was not well received, back then.
There was way too much testosterone. Way too much testosterone in that room for the Village People to be.
And they're singing in the Navy, I mean, this is going on. But good times. But also interesting that back then you could win a show earlier. Earl Maynard actually is in the original Olympia because he wins the Universe earlier that night.
That's right.
So that's why his name gets added to the list. Yeah. And Dave Draper would make his appearance the following year. 67, 68, and 69 is all Sergio. Okay, yeah. Sergio comes on the scene, takes the fourth year, but then really comes into his own the following year, beating Chuck Sipes. Harold Poole went to third, and Dave Draper, who by this point won the America, won the Universe, would end up in fourth place in 67. Trivia question for you, Shawn. Obviously, I do my homework on these things, but this is a tough one. Nobody ever gets it right. Who did Sergio beat in 1968 to win the Olympia?
Well, we know Larry Scott did not come back.
Larry Scott, actually, for the record, won in 65 and 66, and then he hung him up. He says, all right, I'm out. I'm done. Thank you. Good night, everybody. So Scott's out. Who did Sergio beat in 68 to become Mr. Olympia?
That is a good question because I was only 3 years old and I don't think I was interested in bodybuilding. Who was it?
You got Google like everybody else, Mr.
I know, but that's not something I'd be actually Googling.
The answer is nobody.
Yeah, that's right. He was by himself.
He beat nobody. He won.
I thought it was 69, but go ahead.
No. Actually, we're going to get into the 70s, but we're going to wait for another week to cover the 70s. Right. He would go uncontested. And the only guy that was going to compete against him was Chuck Sipes, who won the Mr. World competition. And
the question is, where was everyone at? Why did they not show up?
I don't think they wanted any part of Sergio. I actually believe at that point he was so dominating that people didn't want to lose again. They just says, all right, I ain't going up against this guy, right? Chuck Sipes was actually going to throw his hat in the ring. And the story goes that Weider told him, yeah, you may want to sit this one out because you ain't going to win, type of thing. But so he went unopposed in 68. And, it's interesting because when you look at the origins of the Olympia, and, it's all history now and we get that, but there wasn't a whole host of people competing, from 60 to 70 something.
Yeah.
Arnold would go uncontested one of those years. We'll get into that later. But 69, Sergio would reign supreme again over Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was a basic newcomer at that time, and a 4-3 decision. It was actually that close, Shawn.
Well, Sergio, I think, is a little bit older. He has more muscle maturity. He was thicker. Arnold was still green and wet behind the ears. We knew that his time would come as he matured and got older. Sure. And of course, Arnold had to learn what the importance of winning was, right? Sometimes you have to lose in order to understand the importance of winning. But I think that served as a pivotal point of apples and oranges. I'm also part of that apples and oranges dynasty that Dorian Yates, along with Muhammad Makaway and Lee Haney, sure. Along with Lee Haney and Rich Kaspari, right. Along with Lee Haney and Lee Labrada. There's apples and oranges. It's very rarely do you have two, like Lee Haney said,
we got a lot of fruits in this camp.
Yeah, a lot of fruit in this camp. But that's where I think you had to choose what you favored more. And I think Arnold just wasn't ready for prime time at the stage.
Well, keep in mind now, when Arnold makes his way this way, he's already a Mr. Universe winner a few times. Won to Mr. Right. Europe, he was on his way. But it wasn't immediate success. He got beat a few times, one by Chet Yorton, who was a self-proclaimed natural bodybuilder, whether he was or wasn't, doesn't really matter.
Frank Zane beat him.
And Frank Zane beat him. And Zane was no monster back then. He was refined even back for those days. And Arnold was not pleased. I mean, Arnold was taken aback. And I remember reading an article where he says he got beat by a chicken. He
Was
called
that
him.
19, was that 69 when that happened?
That was 68 or 69. It was earlier in the year. Because Arnold was tremendous at the 69 Olympia. Only Sergio was such a freak at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, some of those greatest shots of Sergio you've ever seen were from 69 and 70.
And the majority of it had to do with his genetics. I mean, you
oh my God. Well, and you know, the funny thing is talking to Sergio Jr., who, although a baby, you know, toddler at the time, obviously, you know, this was his father. He knows a lot more than we do, you know, especially from his mother and such. But he would tell me stories. I mean, his father, you talk about genetic freaks, bro. He told me his father, Sergio Sr., would diet with Dr. Pepper and like Big Macs and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, this is what this guy would eat.
He's very similar to John Brown and Vince Taylor, I might add, and Flex Wheeler. They were not nutrition gurus, man. Those guys ate like garbage, but they had the genetics to put it all together. And again, I knew Sergio Sr. Better than I know Sergio Jr.
Right.
So his work ethic, the style of training that he did, I mean, he was ahead of his time. And of course, you know, he didn't have the most likable personality for the industry. And this is a guy that was a full-time cop, you know?
Yeah.
And he was Ronnie Coleman before Ronnie Coleman.
Well, I mean, listen, the genetics were tremendous. I mean, probably, arguably, and maybe not even, maybe the best genetics of all time in any.
I agree, and I listen to the point where the 1983 Mr. Olympia Samir Banu, when I began bodybuilding, named his son after Sergio Oliva Sr. Dorian Yates, I think, also was in agreement that Sergio Oliva is probably one of the greatest of all time.
Well, we'll get into, you know, the 1970s on our next edition as we do our 6-month countdown to the Olympia. But that was a real controversial one. We could touch on a little bit because that would mark Sergio's exit out as Arnold beats him. And to this day, there's people who will swear on a stack of Bibles or a stack of Pump and Iron magazines and Education of a Bodybuilder that Sergio should have beaten Arnold in 1970, and it was a weeder thing, and now you got into the magazines and all that. Your thoughts on that one, Shawn?
Well, listen, what we do, it's still a business, okay? And this guy had some personality flaws. His English wasn't the best. Not that Arnold's was better.
Yeah, right.
But when you're running a business and you have people that are involved in all facets of the business, it's like American Idol. Sometimes you got to make these tough decisions for what's good for the brand, what's good for the company, what's good for the title. And there's collateral damage. And listen, in a sport of subject opinion, they don't always get it right. But the one thing that we saw was that there's a continuum. We're celebrating 60 years from that controversy way back when. There was controversy in 1980.
Sure.
There was controversy in 1981.
Oh, yeah.
There's controversy. We can find controversy that all comes back to the subjective sum total of what a collection of judges decided. And whether it was right or wrong, it's good for the business. And that's why we are where we're at, celebrating 60 years. History will go back. We can't rewrite it, but we can debate it. If you go back and change it, maybe we have more controversial decisions, or maybe we don't. I think, you know, this is all up for debate, but I think both of those individuals went on to greener pastures. Our sport grew out of that controversy. And we've seen that in professional boxing when a referee steps in and stops a fight prematurely. Same thing in the UFC. And again, those controversies in a sport of subject opinion are going to happen more often than not.
Well, Arnold would go on to reign supreme for another 6 years straight. Sergio would make his way over to the WBBG, which was a whole different federation. And then a whole new cast of characters would find their way to the Olympia in the 70s, which would bring in the modern physique, as we call it, with the likes of Frank Zane coming into focus and all these guys, Metzner, Padilla, and all the greats. But Shawn, always a pleasure going on memory lane, but that starts our Olympia series off with the 1960s at the Olympia.
Well, I just want to add one point. Remember, we're talking about an infant sport in the midst of the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
In the midst of an assassination of a president, in the midst of the civil rights leaders,
right.
Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy getting shot. in the changing of the guard and the Nixon, we're going into the 70s where Nixon, when we start talking about the global aspect of what's
Oh, yeah.
happening in our universe, you got Ben and Joe plodding away with a physique contest,
Right.
you know, and then the introduction of the women towards the end of the 70s. So there's a lot going on in our universe. And at the same time, are we even talking about prize money for the Olympia in 65 to 70?
$1,000, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, in 75 or 70 in the 70s, I think it peaked with like $5,000 or something back there.
Yeah.
And when we get to the 70s, we're going to realize that there's a different thing at work here, because now we have the introduction of the Sandow Trophy in 1977, which becomes an iconic component of the Mr. Olympia for all of our champions that Larry Scott did not get.
Well,
That Arnold
keep in mind
Schwarzenegger,
also
Arnold
pumping
Schwarzenegger
iron.
did not get one of those in the 70s. He got it in
Right.
the 80s.
That's right. Pumping iron would come out. That would literally put bodybuilding on the map, and then everything would explode. Because to that point, bodybuilding magazines were very obscure. They weren't collector's items. People didn't understand bodybuilding. They didn't get it. And it wasn't until 75 and Arnold and all that, when pumping iron hits the airwaves, that all of a sudden we're thrust in the map and the spotlight comes on. And you're right. It was Joe Weider at that point. But, you know, just to close it out, people like to dump on Weider all the time for politics and this and that. But given all that you just said, you had race riots, you had all the global stuff going on. Joe Weider was pumping out magazines with people of all ethnicities on the cover. He had all kinds of winners: black guys, Cuban guys, white guys, guys from Europe, right? Almost nobody that was on there was a white guy from America. So you got to give them credit where it's due, where they let these things play out, and whoever won. But, was there politics? Sure, there was politics. We'll get into that at a later time. But when it got into race relations, things like that, you got to give the Weeders credit, man. They pretty much let it play out.
Yeah, they did, and there really was no fuss or controversy. Hindsight's 2020. Some guys felt like they got slighted, and we'll get into that, because in the 70s, it could have went in any direction.
Sure.
You remember we had what was going on in Iran in the 77, the gas shortage, Jimmy Carter coming in, President Nixon and all that controversy, all the hippies and the marijuana, all that stuff is going to change the dynamic of what Joe and Ben were doing in the 70s, which set up the stage for the introduction of our celebrity cover guys on the magazines to make us even bigger as we incorporate the aerobics and the television and the commentating into the 1980s.
All right. Well, Shawn, appreciate that as always, my brother. I'll be back next week, folks, with an all-new edition of The Voice of Bodybuilding. We'll be reviewing what we saw in Pittsburgh, and, of course, we'll have a full list of who's going to be in New York, and we'll cover a lot of that. All right, that's going to close it out, everybody. The Voice of Bodybuilding, that's Shawn Ray. I'm Bob Chick.